Is this going to turn into a political stream? That's a great question. I think it's good that we're able to ask such great questions, and I think what's mostly important about discussing the politics and the idea of the general... Some of you were here last stream, some of you immediately knew. So right, what happened? Basically, I just went to Brussels. First of all, incredible city. Like, architecture, absolutely beautiful. Just undeniably beautiful, pretty city. And I spoke to the Parliament, the European Parliament, about the Stop Killing Games initiative. And I praised in that stream the process of democracy. And somebody commented and said, Josh, I can't believe you're glazing politicians like this. I said, listen, that's a very good point. We need to address this. I don't like politicians. What I like is the process of democracy. What I like is the democratic idea that everyone gets a say or an input on the way that they are governed, the way their country, their systems are ran. I think the idea of each person being heard, having their opinions and their lived experience listened to, referenced, and understood, I think that is an important aspect. Do I like the people that do that? Not as much. But do I think the system itself is a good idea? Yes, I do. I think the idea of listening to people and taking their ideas on board, very good. Very good idea, in general. Yeah, I mean, the only thing holding democracy back from being perfect is human nature. And as soon as we can overcome that, oh, we're laughing. Unfortunately, problem is that we have to still keep dealing with people. I don't know if you've met people. Absolute bunch of bastards. Dealing with them, bad idea in general. I think what I disliked the most about the things that I saw online specifically was there was a clip that went up about I was talking about PirateSoftware. And people were like, oh my God, I can't believe you're being so nice to the guy. You're giving him far too much credit. You're being far too gracious with this. And then someone else commented, and this drove it home for me. This is the internet's attitude in general. Someone drove it home saying he got what he deserved. Okay. So if you're an arrogant arsehole and bad things then happen to you, the internet thinks you deserve those things. That is not the kind of system that ideally I would like to live in. Because while I understand that Jason did not approach the discussion with good intentions or approach the discussion with, what's the best way to phrase this? Probably he didn't approach it with, pure intentions of actually trying to understand stuff. He had his own opinion with that. And people didn't like that, and now bad things happened, and people did stuff that they absolutely shouldn't have done to him, and then people said, oh, that's fine. And people said to me, Josh, why are you being so gracious with this? Two reasons. One, I have to leave the door open. I think if you want to foster a discussion in the future, you very much have to show that you are willing to leave the door open. Because if you shut the door as soon as someone disagrees with you, what reason do they ever then have to agree with you in the future? If they can see they've said something and they've angered you and they've upset you and you've decided to completely close off the entire discussion in the future, what motivation do they ever have to rethink their stance and come over and chat to you? If you are focusing more on vindicating yourself and punishing the other person, you are basically saying that you don't care about starting any kind of dialogue with this person. What matters now is the vengeance. What matters now is the revenge. I don't like that. So the reason that I will show possibly, according to a lot of people, too much understanding and too much grace with that is that I think it's important that we leave a door open. That if he ever says one day, hey, you know what, I want to come back and have a chat about this, we're willing to have that. That's very important on my part. The second part is that if people think that someone doing something they dislike then deserve bad things happen to them, I've often found that if you engage in a system that perpetuates hate, it is only a matter of time until that turns on you. Which means if I am willing to support bad things happening to someone that I don't like, it is inevitable that eventually I will do something that somebody else doesn't like, and then that system will happen to me, and I'll be sat there going, why are you treating me this way? Well, the answer is because I was treating other people that way. If I am going to engage in a system that punishes people because of their past deeds, then I have to understand that at some point I will be punished for my past deeds. And I have to ask myself sometimes, if I mess up, if I do something that is unpopular, if I do something that requires a little bit of educating, people need to sit me down and say to me, hey, this is why you were wrong. How do I want them to treat me? Do I want them to treat me with the same harshness that I treated with somebody else? Well, no. I would ideally have them treat me with the same grace that I try to treat somebody else with. So all those people saying that I was being far too nice, maybe there's an element of self-preservation to it. Maybe there's an element of, maybe I was, but I would rather have this. Yeah, any kind of connection back and forth is a game of tennis. Every time someone hits the tennis ball of conversation back to somebody else, you add a little bit more energy into that ball. You add a little bit more spin, more change. And if you add, hatred and vileness to it, then it'll be returned to you that way. And eventually, it's going to become too big for both of you to bear. It sucks to be able to treat people who have treated you shitty in a nice way. But sometimes it's the only way that you get the solution you want. And you have to occasionally ask yourself, do you want a solution or do you want an argument? Alan, it is about facing consequences, absolutely. What's more important to you? Punishing someone for the things they've done or getting to a solution where the future you want is happening? Which of those would you rather have happen? And if one of those requires you to extend a bit more grace to the person you're talking to, despite the fact they may be, in your opinion, a shitty person, what is more important to you? Do you value them facing consequences more than you value the system being beneficial to everyone else? That's the question. Because a lot of people would far rather see someone punished for something wrong that they've done instead of see the future actually be beneficial for everyone else if it means the punishment doesn't happen. Now, you can, of course, have both. You absolutely can have both. But ask yourself the question, and be honest, guys. Be genuine here. Do you think the internet mob is smart enough to know that? A person is smart. People are stupid. That's how it is. So when people say to me, oh, we should be focusing on the punishment. Okay, do you know what the internet's like? That would literally never end. It would be an endless cycle of punishment forever. And that would not help anyone. Which is why sometimes people message me going, I can't believe you're being nice to this guy when he's been an arsehole. I'm like, well, the opposite is that I'd be an arsehole to him. And then, based on human nature, he won't be like, oh, you know what, I was wrong. He'll just double down. And then I'll double down. Then he'll double down. Then I'll double down. Then suddenly, you've got this generations-long feud. That doesn't work. The end goal should ultimately be rehabilitation, reconciliation, understanding, and a future that benefits everyone, not constant punishment. That shouldn't be how it works. At least I don't think it should be. You also have to occasionally step back and say to yourself, what's more important? Being right or achieving what you want to achieve? Because if someone said to me, hey Josh, you can have everything you want right now, but everyone will think you're a massive arsehole. Okay, that's an interesting question. If you were offered this magical genie wish of the Stop Killing Games initiative immediately works, and companies and corporations are 100% on board with it, and it doesn't harm developers and it doesn't hurt players, if you were able to instantly get everything that you said that you value, but everyone thinks that you didn't do it, everyone thinks you were against it, would you do that? That's an interesting question. What would you value? Being seen by the public as a villain, but you actually end up living in the situation you want to live in? Or would you rather not achieve the thing that you actually want to achieve, but avoid the hatred? Because that's a really hard thing to look into. Do you want people to hate you for the wrong reasons, or like you for the wrong reasons? And that's a hard question, which is why sometimes when I can see someone doing something wrong, something that I think and I disagree with, I say to myself, okay, what's the future? What do we want? How does this work? How do we work together to get the future we want? No matter what I think about them, what other people think about them, what do I do? Zeus, what did he do wrong? I think the personal attacks were a bit too much. Yeah, the personal attacks were far too much. You don't need to insult someone's appearance while you are attempting to effectively debate an initiative that they are spearheading. Would that not require we assume the other people don't form a mob of pitchforks and fight? Yeah, absolutely. What is the circumstance that sparked this lovely philosophical talk? I think it was mostly about the clip that came up about me talking about PirateSoftware, and people were like, Josh, you're being far too kind to this guy, he's an asshole. I'm like, okay, well, what does being mean to him achieve? It achieves, you feel good. Yeah, you feel good because you're attacking someone that you don't like. You're fighting the good fight, but that's not going to get the system and the situation that we actually want to happen in the future to happen. That is not going to aid that at all. That's not going to leave the door open for future discussion, is it? Sometimes it's really hard to put your ego aside and say, right, I want to attack this person because I know that it's the right thing to do as far as my morals tell me. However, I also know that's not going to achieve the situation I want to achieve. Sometimes you want to attack somebody on the internet. Oh, yeah, absolutely. God knows. We all want to do that sometimes. Everyone at some point just wants to attack someone on the internet. We all know that. What would happen if the grace isn't rendered back to you? Bro, what happens if the grace isn't rendered back to you is something you then need to... That genuinely is a good question. What happens if you show someone grace and they don't render it back to you? You now have to ask yourself a question. This is the prisoner's dilemma. It's the prisoner's dilemma of emotional kind of reciprocity. If someone is an arsehole to you and you are nice to them and they continue to be an arsehole to you, what point changes their response to you? At what point, at what type of behavior do they actually change? Do they become nice to you and civil if you turn around and treat them like an arsehole? Well, chances are no. They're not going to suddenly start being nice to you if you aren't nice to them, because that's just how these people can be. Which means it sucks, but the only possible answer, the only possible way to maybe get what you want in the future is to continue being nice to them, or at least being civil. Once you show them their behavior has consequences, absolutely, Lord Zoom, you show them their behavior has consequences. That is a really good way of looking at it. The carrot and the stick, both part of a well-built, functioning society. What kind of carrot and stick are we then looking for? Because we need to leave the door open for continued chat. We need to show that there is a willingness to engage in kind of democratic discussion. They need to see that exists. Because if that doesn't exist, there is literally no motivation ever to change. There needs to be motivation to change. Now, the motivation can either come from rewarding the behavior you want to see or punishing the behavior you don't want to see. Rewarding the behavior you want to see is, continuing to engage in a nice, fair topic and discussion and actually acknowledging when someone else does something that you would consider good. That's a very important thing that you want to do. Actually, when someone does something beneficial, acknowledge it. Say, hey, that was good. But how do you prevent the behavior you don't want to see? Because insulting people doesn't do that. Insulting someone normally, or attacking someone, especially on the internet, doesn't actually make them change the behavior. They don't rethink about it and think, you know what, yeah, that was right. I deserve that. I'm going to change. That is not how that works. So what does work? You love the glasses. Thank you. I get migraines if I stare at the screen too long. This tries to help. I mean, Volt, stopping communication. That's one way. That's absolutely one way. It's interesting to see so many people not understanding the concept of not hating someone when your thoughts differ. Visa, good to see you here. Hope you're doing good, man. I heard a saying yesterday that I really agree with. Nobody cares what you think unless you don't think what they think. And when I read that, I thought, oh my God, that's actually quite true. Because everyone will say to you, oh man, I don't care. We can differ. We can differ, that's fine. Then you do differ, and they're like, oh, this is bad. Now, if you want the carrot and the stick of changing behavior, just throwing out insults at someone and hating them, believe it or not, doesn't change behavior. Feels good, doesn't change behavior. So you have to ask yourself, okay, what actually changes behavior? You've got to engage in dialogue, and you've got to show a willingness to engage and be open with that. That's what you've got to show. You don't show that, you've got no reason to ever change someone's behavior. But you've also then got to have the idea that if someone continues to engage in bad behavior, there will be a level of punishment. Now, the internet, as a kind of collective, thinks that when we say there is a level of punishment, they mean insulting someone. Or, if they're slightly more unhinged, they mean sending a level of violence to someone. That doesn't really work. That does not work at all. And the reason that doesn't work is because it's not collectively understood. Let me explain what that means. Let's imagine that you say something online and you insult thousands of people. And those thousands of people then take it upon themselves to render themselves the arbiters of your punishment. They basically say, right, you've done something wrong. You therefore must be punished because that will change your behavior. I am going to show you how wrong your behavior was by punishing you. I'm going to find out where you live and attack you. I'm going to send something horrific to your address. I'm going to SWAT you. Any of these kind of things, I'm going to try and send a virus to your email. I'm going to call at the places that you work and get you punished for that. Okay, I understand why people do these things, because it feels good. But the internet is not demanding a change in behavior. The internet is demanding retribution and often humiliation. That's what... They don't actually and this is where the kind of the hypocritical nature of it comes in, they don't actually care if you change your behavior. They don't, because they won't follow up. There's no follow-up to see if their punishment did anything, because it's very much not proportional to the actual thing. They just care that you are punished for the behavior. Now, if you did one thing and one person punished you for that, okay, cool, I get that. I understand. I don't agree, but I understand. But this is the internet, which means that you don't have one person rendering their punishment to you one time. You have hundreds, possibly thousands, sending messages, attempting to call you, attempting to harass you, attempting to punish you, because all of them individually feel vindicated by what they're doing. Every individual person thinks they are doing the right thing because they see themselves as the only arbiter of that punishment, when suddenly you as the victim of it are facing it hundreds or even thousands of times over. And that is massively unfair. Which is why when people say to me, Josh, why am I not dogpiling on Pirate Software? Because I think that's horrific to do, and I think he's suffered far more than he should have done for his opinions. The guy may be an arsehole. I've never met him in real life. We've spoken briefly. I don't know what he's like in real life. But I do know what the internet's like. And I do think that, unfortunately, there have been people who, whenever I've said I don't like something, have contacted that thing or that person and said awful things in my name, which I hate. I absolutely hate that. That's awful. People are taking the idea of using me as some kind of justification for their awful behavior and then doing bad stuff. That's not cool. That's not right. So sometimes when people say to me, why are you being so nice to this guy? It's because I know exactly what the people who take this far too seriously are going to do. And I've got to also not only, work out what I'm going to say, I'm actually trying to balance and mitigate the potential damaging behavior of hundreds of other unhinged people. And I hope you guys can understand that. It's not enough to just say, don't do this thing. You've got to almost calm down the mob before it forms. Yeah, they don't care about right or wrong. They care about hurting others. It's never been about right or wrong, because if it was right or wrong, they would actually follow up on any behavior and see if there's been an improvement. It's never been about the improvement. It's been about the vindication. What happened just got here. We're talking about the internet. We're talking about dangerous people on the internet and how every person on the internet thinks they themselves are individually justified in their small action, but unfortunately it suddenly adds up. So I would rather extend a little bit of grace to someone which prevents people doing stuff in my name. Even if people are like, oh, you're being far too kind. I'm like, nope, I'm being just kind enough to make sure that somebody isn't an arsehole. You wish drama farmers... Well, hey, drama farming is the most effective way to make money. That's why they do it. Because you guys ever seen the James Bond film, Tomorrow Never Dies? I've never forgot this. At the end of Tomorrow Never Dies, James Bond throws the bad guy, I can't remember the guy's name, into a printing press. Because the guy basically controls global media by causing disasters and then reporting on them before anyone else. Carver. Yes, possibly Carver. It's a really good one. The one with the media mogul, played by Jonathan someone. Good actor. He throws him into the printing press, and Bond says, before he throws him in, you forgot the first rule of mass media. Give the people what they want. If you want to make money in media, you give the people what they want. And the reason you give them what they want is because if you give them what they don't want, they will leave. Even if it would be good for them. It would be good for people who are in an echo chamber to sit around and listen to the other side. It would be good for people who don't want to hear about a certain thing to at least listen to some of the arguments, even if they don't necessarily fully engage with it. But people don't want that. You shudder to think how good I'd be at drama farming. If I decide to turn evil, I'll become a politician. I'm sure I could do that if I try. The majority of entertainment isn't about challenging people. It's not about making people feel uncomfortable. Good art can make people feel uncomfortable. Good art, good engagement with art, can make you question your own beliefs. And I did that years ago. I did that many, many years ago. And I think it was university. It was university that unradicalized me from being an extreme, I would say in English terms, much more of the far left. And the reason that I was pushed away from this was because I realized that when you get into extreme ideologies either side, it no longer becomes about actually supporting the people that you're claiming to support, and instead becomes a purity test. I had seen friends believe in one ideology or another be insulted and shot down by others who believed in that ideology more. And then it suddenly became, well, I support this thing more than you do, therefore I am righteous and you are wrong. And while I was sitting back and I thought, hang on, I was friends with all of you guys because I thought you were supporting the humanitarian cause. I thought you were supporting the right thing. But I realized that this whole thing is actually about ego. It's completely about ego. It's I am more holy than you. I am more righteous than you. When I realized that's where it was going to, I thought, you know what? This isn't the right thing to be part of. So yeah, that's how I kind of looked into it. It's sports. It's just sports. One thing that's also very, very important to remember. If you are part of any group that curates its membership by requiring more and more proof of support, more and more extremist, purity test, ideological proof. If you're part of any group that says, well, actually, now we have to agree with this, and now we have to agree with that, and now we have to agree with that, and it slowly starts to cull people and curate people out of it because they aren't following along with the current most important thing, then I guarantee eventually you will be one of the people that is culled. It might be very fun to be part of the mob while you're kicking somebody else in the mob out. But eventually, if you do that, you are supporting and curating a system that will eventually kick you out. Which is why sometimes I say to people, look, I disagree with this aspect of what you've got going on, but we agree on this, so we can still kind of at least engage in some kind of conversation. And people say to me, oh, but they don't agree with you 100%, therefore you cannot work with them. I say, okay, if that's your level, if you don't agree with someone 100%, you cannot work with them, then what happens when you and I don't agree 100%? Do we just immediately cease everything? Do we cease everything beneficial? I don't think that's a smart way to be. Being a zealot on either side is generally a bad idea. And people will jump on me and call me a centrist and say, oh my God, I can't believe that you're not supporting one side or the other. It's not sports. I don't win if your side loses. I win if society gets better. The idea that society can only get better if one side gets literally everything it wants means that you are ignoring the lived experience of millions of people. And suddenly that's not democratic anymore. But you say this online and people are like, oh, so you want everything that I hate to happen. No. No, I don't. I guarantee you get off the internet, you go out, you talk to people, the vast majority of people on either side of any political spectrum will probably agree with each other on most things, because they're not extremist. In political circles, it's called being a fence sitter. Yeah, okay, cool. I will happily sit on that fence if the alternative is killing everyone on one side of the fence or the other. If the alternative is, completely dehumanizing one side of the fence or the other in order to make sure that my side of the fence likes me the most, I'm not going to say, well, you know what? In order to get this side of people to like me, I've got to dehumanize and completely objectify that entire other side. Sounds like a sucky thing to do. Plus, I live in the English countryside. Nothing wrong with sitting on a fence and enjoying the fields on both sides for a bit. Oh, but Josh, you're not standing up for anything. Yes, I am, actually. There are many things I'll stand up for. They just happen to be things that the majority of people on both sides agree with, because I think they're the right things to do. This is going to be a sayers video. I know it's going to be a sayers video. There's no point trying to talk about it, because people will, yeah, exactly, you'll get hated by both sides. That's fine. I'm totally okay with that. If someone is going to hate me for having empathy for somebody they don't like, then their hatred doesn't mean that much to me. And of course, there are extreme examples and extreme situations, and what happens with the internet is that it always goes to hyperbole. It always goes straight away to, oh, well, I bet you feel sorry for insert the worst possible person you can think of. And I'm like, no, that's another extreme example that we're trying to literally get away from. You're saying that there is a massive, like there's a 98% middle ground, and then there's a 1% extreme on either side. And then as soon as you say, well, okay, maybe both sides have a point, people jump to, oh, so you agree with the 1% of the extreme. No, I don't. They're both bad. That's what happens. And I hate the hyperbole argument, because you say to someone, hey, maybe we should have empathy for people who don't think the same way that we do. And then they immediately jump at you with, oh, so you like literally the worst person to ever exist. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm saying that maybe we should have empathy for people that are within that general circle, but not that bad, because they don't understand that there is another way, and maybe a show of empathy would help them understand that the world can be different. We place the vindication over the rehabilitation of people, and therefore we end up with a world that is focused on revenge. Oh god, it's the internet waffle pancake argument, isn't it? I like pancakes. Oh, so you hate waffles. No, I had a Belgian waffle. It was lovely. No, I had a Brussels waffle, which I didn't realize were different things. See, when I said Belgian waffle, I always thought Belgian waffle was like the thing that you would have in Belgium, like the kind of circular style waffle with little clumps of sugar within it. I didn't realize that the Brussels waffle is a different thing. And the Brussels waffle was lovely, actually. I really enjoyed that. People in Brussels were lovely. They were really nice.